Hi everyone, this is Pradeep from Sydney signing on to yet another session of GCC. Well, I will let you on what GCC is global chapters and connections, but that's okay from an acronym perspective. What is GCC trying to do? GCC is building up a global platform, a value based platform where IIT Delhi alumni can connect with each other on value proposition basis. But it is not only just for IIT Delhi alumni, but also for the faculty, students, and related stakeholders. And today is episode 9 of GCC, and I'm absolutely delighted to talk to you about some of our seniors who have such large shoes. I think not only both my legs could go into, or both my feet can go into one shoe, or even then there'll be so much space over there that I'm so surprised and amazed. And we are talking of 1967 batch, the second batch to pass out of IIT Delhi. When you can imagine the brand name IIT was not even established for what it is today. We didn't have millions and billions of people applying for the so little number of seats, and this is a question which I always have thought, that is the branding of IIT because of the quality of students which are coming in, and in that be the case, then what is the value add? But let me not go down that particular path, because it's the sum total of all of this. For today's session, I would like to acknowledge my sincere thanks to our GCC colleague Dinesh Sikand. When I reached out to Dinesh and I put forward the idea of 1967, not only did I get a response back in one day, and one day is more because of the time difference between where he lives and where I live. I live in Sydney and he lives in Montreal. So, but more importantly, I had 9 alumni from 1967 batch. And that got me thinking, man, how am I going to present 9 people on one day? So I said, why don't I split it into 2 batches? Well, that's my IIT, brilliance coming along. But that apart, my sincere thanks to him and the energetic way the whole thing went about. And also, let me kind of remind you people that how this is working. If I had written to these 9 gentlemen, would they have even acknowledged my email? Probably not, because they don't know me. I mean, it is because of they know Dinesh, Dinesh knows me. So, what Dinesh has done is he's transferred his trust onto me. So, I'm indeed very thankful to also all these 9 gentlemen, but to Dinesh for the brilliant part that he's played into this. And with this, I kick off the session today by asking Dinesh to introduce and kickstart this session before I get into my style. And I've got some interesting questions today, for there are some very, very fascinating people over here. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to the first batch that we are presenting today of the second batch of IIT Delhi, and in particular to Dinesh. Dinesh, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pradeep. And good morning, evening, and night to friends all over the world. I am Dinesh Sekant. I was also known as Good Sekant when I was in IIT Delhi. That was my name at that point of time, actually. And I changed it when I got married. Well, I am grateful I have been given the honor by my batchmates and by Pradeep of coordinating and presenting to you a glimpse of batch of 1967. I'm speaking from Brampton, Canada. I take you back in time by 61 years when, on 27 January 1959, the foundation stone of the college were laid by Prince Philip. The first batch of IIT Delhi commenced in 61 and they graduated in 1966. We, the 1967 batch, are the second batch. We are proud of it, and it commenced in 1962. It was a 5-year integrated course comprising of mechanical, electrical, chemical, civil, and textile branches. Our batch strength was about 196, and we stayed in Shivalik and Vindhyachal hostels. Sharma Dhabas and Coca-Cola were the favorites those days. Professor Arun Dogra, a civil engineer, mind you, I am also a civil engineer, was the first director. Mr. Tilochan Singh was the registrar, and Air Commodore R.H.D. Singh, retired, was chief warden of hostels and administration. The buildings were designed by Chaudhary and Gulzar and were under different stages of construction at that time. And initially, classes were held in a single-story buildings on the left side of the main road. The sex farms which you see or Aurobindo Marg were actually a piggery, and that chap used to come and deposit his money in the SBI bank inside the campus. IIT Delhi was funded by British government, and all the heads of department, about 15 of them, were from UK. Just to name a few, Professor R.J. Cornish was HOD of Civil Engineering, Professor Rumford, Chemistry, Professor R.K. Guy, Tripos and Mathematics from Oxford, was in Mathematics. My friends subsequently will tell you more names. The President's Gold Medal for 1967 batch was awarded to Sundar Krishnan. He lives in Canada now. And Director's Gold Medal went to Ram Mata, who is in USA. All of us of 1967 batch have celebrated our Diamond Jubilee birthdays of 75 years, have celebrated Golden Jubilee of graduation, and Golden Jubilee of wedding anniversaries. So that is where we are. The presentation, as Pradeep mentioned, today is the first part and will be made by me, followed by Anand Agrawal from Ottawa, Canada, then Om Sharma from Connecticut, USA, Admiral Ravinder Bhatia from India, and followed by Rishi Madan from India again. Since I am already speaking, I think I'll cover my part of the story. After graduation,
hang on a sec, Dinesh, before I ask you to cover your story. Let me tell you a sign of aging. Every time I speak to Dinesh and he keeps telling me he's from Brompton, and I keep on saying, oh, you're from Montreal, And this is in spite of the fact that he is 10 years, only 10 years senior to me. And let me also tell you that, guys, we see the movie Sher Shah and we talk about Kargil and all that. When we hear about Kargil, this man has been at the forefront and he's been creating infrastructure at the borders where war is going on. This is what the caliber of the man we are talking about, You can only dream about such things as see in movies, And he retired as Director General of what is that thing called, let me see, Military Engineering Services and whole lot of other senior positions, So hats off to you, sir. And now you can talk more about yourself.
So thank you. Thank you very much for those kind words. After graduation, I joined Indian Defence Service of Engineers through combined engineering service examination conducted by UPSC. I worked in military engineering service for 37 years with Army, Air Force, Navy, and planned, designed, constructed, and maintained assets like family homes, offices, ammunition storages, airfields, and dockyards spread over plains and high altitude areas like JNK and Leh and Ladakh, 11,000 feet and above in areas beyond Khardungla Pass. I also served in battle zone areas in 1971 conflict and Kargil conflict in 1999 with our neighboring country. I commenced my journey with the army in 1969-70 in Shimla Hills, where I built office and married accommodation for them. In the hills, you have to cut the hill and make retaining walls to get a flat area to make the buildings. Incidentally, this area was spread over Kasauli, Solan, and Chal. And as you know, Solan was very popular those days for Mohan Meekan breweries who were making whiskies with brands like Red Knight and Black Knight and Golden Eagle beer. They needed somebody at that point of time to design some buildings for them. And since I was available, I, in my spare time, designed those buildings for which they were very grateful. And they ensured that as and when any guest of mine came to Solan from Chandigarh, they will be conducted around the breweries, given 6 bottles of golden beer with tray and a fresh glass of chilled beer from the plant directly. In Chal, which was next door, which was a military station, and we were running a military school there, I met Captain Amarinder Singh, who was then Maharaja of Patiala and now Chief Minister. I'm told he's just resigned probably today. His grandfather had built tons of palaces in that hill. Especially one of his family members was banished from Shimla by the Britishers because of some misbehavior probably. And so he came to Chal, built a palace, and had a balcony in such a way that he could see the Scandal Point in Shimla from there in a clear weather. I now move to 1971 when I got married, and lo and behold, the Indo-Pak War also started. And I was soon posted to battle zone in Punjab in the area ranging from Fazilka, Abhor, and Shri Ganganagar, and they were all non-family station. But as a special case, I was allowed to bring my wife along. It was hot summer with temperatures ranging from 40 degrees centigrade, and I was challenged by a gigantic task of providing basic amenities to a large number of troops as an immediate requirement in shortest possible time, which was totally new to me and is never taught. Well, after interaction with commanders, I evolved a critical path method flowchart, took baby elephant steps by breaking up the whole challenge into tent plinths for fixing tents for living, setting up pumping stations along the nearby canals and providing water supply at selected points to clusters, setting up DG sets together with electricity from Punjab Electricity Board by licensing with them, and providing deep trench latrines for field washrooms. Further, to ensure that no soldier sleeps on the floor, I contacted all the local businesses for making charpais with locally available material. Because the nearest city was far away in Firozpur. So I tried to muster all possible resources, and luckily we met the mission was a success. And the local general gave a party, and in that party he told me a story. Actually, I was the junior most officer and he was the senior most officer there. He told me, Sikand, when I was a lieutenant and when I joined the army, I used to be at the tail end of the line for dinner. I used to
Oh, you're frozen.
I'll be much happier. Can you listen to me?
Yes, now we can.
Yeah. So so when he became a general now, and he could not eat butter chicken now because the military doctor had told him that you've got high cholesterol level and therefore you can't eat the chicken. So he said, Sikand, do not wait to become a general and enjoy life right now itself. Today, in that area, there's a beautiful permanent cantonment. It's a place to watch actually. Now I move 22 years ahead because time is short to 1999, the Kargil episode. I was posted as chief engineer and tasked with the challenge of integrating the Air Force assets in the mountainous area spread from Jammu to Leh and Ladakh, which ranges up to 11,000 feet and even the hills are up to 19,000 feet. This area has several airfields for tourists and for the security of the country and are useful in present day tensions which are going on with the Chinese in the Galwan Valley. The peculiarities of the area are the height varies from 7,000 to 11,000 feet with peaks touching around 19,000 feet. Because of lack of oxygen and rarefied air, workers need acclimatization and get tired very early. The temperatures dip down to minus 25 degree. There is extreme cold and snow, and working season is limited to barely 5 months. The skilled workers are not available at that time, and they used to be airlifted from planes. And there was no availability of construction materials and equipment in those areas, and they had to be brought by trucks or by air from planes. In June, July 1999, the Kargil conflict happened, and there was immense activity in my area because of intrusion by our neighbors into our area, and Tiger Hill became well known. Since some operations were being conducted by Air Force from one of my airfields, so we had to be ready at every airfield under my control for emergency repair of runways. Because once you entangle with Air Force, the opposition can also do air bombardment and cause large craters in the runway and make it unoperational. So for such purposes, we have teams and we use rapid setting cement concrete together with boulders to fill up the craters and repair quickly so that part runway is ready again for use. Usually those days, high alumina cement with high tricalcium aluminate with additives was kept ready in dry form and mixed with water when required, and it gains sufficient strength in 3 to 4 hours. It gives faster setting time, higher early strength, and better durability. Many other rapid setting cement concretes are also available, which are proprietary items, so their names cannot be mentioned. Nowadays, we also use polymeric materials, which set much earlier and give you early strength actually. These days, Air Force is also exploring options of using national highways for emergency use. You might have heard about the Noida Highway being used for test runs and all that. US Army engineers have been doing a lot of work on this, and they are thinking of new materials for repairs. Another achievement in that high altitude area was construction of shelters for our brave soldiers by using pre-engineered buildings using polyurethane foam and similar materials, which gives you tremendous amount of temperature drop. Minus 25 outside is much less inside, and it was a great success, and I'm sure this technology has been used recently again in the present conflict. Only a few days back, Border Road Organization has announced completion of roads at height of 19,000 feet. Now, during this period of 37 years, I did my master's from Institute of Science, Bangalore. I was detailed to attend military courses like Defense Service Staff College course at Wellington, National Defense College course at New Delhi, which is kept only for very senior officers, and I was head of Department of Structures in College of Military Engineering, Pune, where I taught Army officers from Corps of Engineers for 5 years. I also published lesson plans in the form of blogs like Material Science and Concrete Technology and Construction Techniques for School of Engineering Technology of Indira Gandhi National Open University. For my efforts, I got commendations from Chief of Army Staff, Army Commanders, and Engineer-in-Chief. On retirement as Director General, I joined private sector and served there for some time. These days, my hobbies, which started right from the beginning, are
You have again frozen, Dinesh. And I have to wonder whether this is your.
Mr. Anand did his double post graduation from University of Alberta. He did MSc in Mechanical Engineering as well as Computer Science and set up real estate company Manor Park Management and owns and manages 3,000 rental units, several office buildings, shopping plazas, and chain of hotels and convention center. Some hotel names are Holiday Inn Express at Ottawa and Homewood Suites by Hilton at Ottawa. He's been awarded several awards. Just to mention a few, in 2017, Professional Engineers Ontario Citizenship Award and Indo-Canada Ottawa Business Chamber Award of Excellence. He is a great humanitarian and philanthropist and has raised $11.5 million for Heart Institute over several years. He has also raised money like $100,000 each for Ottawa Cancer Foundation and Royal Mental Hospital. He has also founded an institute called Dhadkan to promote awareness about prevention of heart disease and has recently donated 6,000 square feet of rental space to Ottawa Mission for food services. Over to Anand
So before we go
for
to
telling us.
Anand, let me ask you one question, Dinesh. Have you seen the movie
Sure.
Shershaw? So, on that road where he's singing the song, was that built by you?
I have not seen the movie actually, so
Okay.
sorry.
And were you also
I won't be
singing
able to
songs
comment.
like that hero with your wife and all that kind of a thing? But
Yeah,
never mind,
surely,
for another
absolutely.
session, for
I
another
love
session.
music. I love music. Yeah.
So let's go over to Anand and please first of all give a big round of applause for Dinesh as well as for Anand. And Anand, before I go further, I have a question for you. How many zeros are there in a billion?
I think I don't know offhand. I think we have to ask Rishide Madan, our guru. He knows more about zeros and stuff like that.
So
I just
all
can't give
you do is
numbers.
all what you do is that this chair that you're sitting on, it has got some
Yes.
of those billions in that chair, or they've all been given to
No.
gurdwaras and all this kind of a thing.
Oh, I think it's more mainly Gurdwaras and mandars sitting in my chair, not billions. These are taken by the COVID. COVID has bring the real estate values down so far. So
I
there's billions are already gone somewhere.
I'm so
Anyhow, before I
fascinated
get
by
into
your
my story,
journey. I want to hear about your journey. How did you engineer from IIT, land up in Canada, and did whole lots of other things. And I believe you were also in computers in those early days, and then into real estate. I mean, you could even beat Donald Trump at his own game. But over to you.
oh well. In any case, I think as we my story started in '67. Coming to Canada was another fluke. One of our class fellows, Mr. Subhash Gakhar, I don't know, he has disappeared. We never see him, we never hear from him. He was instrumental in getting me to Canada. He said, look, man, we don't seem to have much future here. You have a large family. You should go to Canada and maybe make some money. So he was the person who really supported me filling up these forms to coming to Canadian universities. And not only that, I was so poor, I couldn't afford the postage. Postage was very heavy, and the enrollment fees, we had to send $50 or something with the application fees. I just didn't have the money. So Mr. Gakhar gave me the money, and he was instrumental in getting me filling up these forms and getting me interested in coming to Canada. Then I finally ended up at the University of Alberta. The only reason I went to University of Alberta was that they gave me the maximum scholarship. I think scholarship was $300 a month or something like that. Other university gave me $250 or $150 or something. Not knowing that Alberta is a very cold place and I may not even survive there, I reached Canada. I lost my baggage in Paris somewhere. Something happened. So without baggage, without anything else, I arrived in Canada, in Montreal Airport, Dorval. Not where Skand lives, where Pradeep thinks Skand lives. So at the Dorval Airport, the immigration officer said, sir, you're going to Alberta? I said, yes. He said, that is a very agricultural province. You are not going to do anything. There you're coming, doing mechanical engineering and going to Alberta. It doesn't make any sense to me. Anyhow, we had no choice. We were welcomed with open arms in the University of Alberta. Surprisingly, my flight arrived at midnight at Edmonton, and this person picked me up personally, which never occurs in Canada these days. Probably you have to take Uber or something, but he took me there and put me some place to sleep and stuff like that, and there we go. Next morning, University of Alberta said, you must need some money. So, wow, we need money? Yes, we need money. I had, in India, when I left, I had probably $58. And out of that, we spent a few dollars in Paris. So I had virtually no money with me when I arrived in Alberta. So University of Alberta gave us 3 months salary in advance. They gave us $1,000. At that time, $1,000 was a big thing. The first thing I went to the bank, got a draft, sent some money home. Because I knew they needed the money. They had borrowed money to bring me here and stuff. So that's the first thing I did. So it was a good journey. Did my graduation. Never thought I'll make it because I didn't think I was any smarter than anybody else, but I survived, finished my master's, looking for a job. At that time, it was 69, there was no job for engineering as such in Alberta or anywhere else for that matter. I had no choice. I went to, I said, well, maybe I should do computer science. That was the name, new game at that time. So I went to the Department of Computer Science and met with the professor or the chairman. They want to switch. And he said, okay, done. Come tomorrow, start the classes. And there I was starting MSc. I go to the first class. This professor of computer science really think he was really a computer scientist. There was no computer science at that time anyway. We were all learning, but he really made it fun of me. He made me almost cry in the class. He says, oh, we have now new plumbers in our class. You know, these guys don't know what computer science is. They come from plumbing background and they want to become computer scientists. Here you go. We had a midterm exam. He comes in, he gives me an exam. 60 minutes, got to finish it. Fine. Coming from IIT Delhi, I don't know what happened. I think something was burning inside me or something. I finished the exam in 30 minutes. I give it to him. He said, man, you're going to definitely flunk it. 60-minute exam, 30 minutes, and you want to go? I said, yeah, there you are. He met me in the evening in a cocktail, and he comes running to me. I was nervous. I said, shit, I'm really flunked it, and this guy is going to kick me out of the school today. However, he comes to me, he says, I'm proud of you. You maxed out, you got 100%, and you finished in 30 minutes. You want to work for me, and I want you to do PhD under me, and blah, blah, blah. There was MSc. 1 year completed. I had this urge of doing a PhD in computer science or computer PhD in something. So there was University of Calgary opening up at that time. Applied there. Surprisingly, I go for an interview there. Who do I meet? My professors from IIT. Half of the department of IIT mathematics, like Professor Richard Gee, has hired them and moved them to Calgary. And likewise, in the mechanical engineering, Dr. Mirza, I don't know how many people remember Dr. Mirza. He taught us applied mechanics at IIT Delhi. He was the chairman of Department of Mechanical Engineering. Of course, he said, sure, you want to start PhD, you can do that. But somehow I applied for the government of Canada at that time, and they gave me a job. That's what I wanted. I didn't want to study. I had done enough of education. I wanted to earn some living. I wanted to go to the real world. Come to government of Canada, they had a kind of a funny problem. They had in Ottawa, it's a big city. It's not that big a city, but it's a city. And there are hundreds of federal buildings. Some are centrally heated, some are not centrally heated, some are, so they were trying to figure out which building should be centrally heated, which not. So I knew Fortran programming at that time. That's the only thing I had learned. I designed a model for them, which were able to forecast the cost of the connections, which model you have. Previously, it was costing them a lot of money because they usually go to consultant, say, look, we want to connect this building to that building and so on and so on. Come up with a number. And it took them 3 months to come up with a number. But there I could do that in 3 days, which was a miracle at that time. But I'm sure that kind of work my grandson can do now, who's 5 years old, in 3 minutes now. Things have changed. There I was, worked for the government for a few years, got kind of boring, and I started putting some money in the real estate business. I think I got a couple of my colleagues to join me, because I didn't know anything about the maintenance. I didn't know how to fix things or how to run a building. So I went to this guy, he says, oh, don't worry about that. I can clean and I can maintain and do everything else. Other guy said, I'll do something else. I said, I'll look after the books. So we ended up buying this 16-unit apartment building near Ottawa, not in Ottawa, near Ottawa. That went very well. So I refinanced and kept investing in real estate. Then I don't know whether my class will remember, Pramod Kumar was our another class fellow from IIT. He was the designer of Canada Arm for the space auto business. So he was in Brampton, as the Dinesh is. And he said, look, I'm getting bored. and I like to put some money in real estate. And my wife just became an agent. I said, fine, sure. So I think we started buying some townhouses at that time. We went to the bank. Bank said, you guys are absolutely crazy. Brampton at that time was a point, it just was nothing there. He says, I've been here for 20 years, nothing happens in Brampton. So you guys are absolutely going nuts and you're going to lose your shirt. In any case, I'll give you the first mortgage. So he lent us money. So between me and Pramod Kumar, we started buying townhouses. I think we bought quite a few townhouses. But that was not enough. So it was getting boring to buy townhouses. So Pramod said, I can design a space out of it. Why can't I build a house? So we ended up buying some land and did 34 townhouses in Brampton. I've not gone there for a long time. I hope they're still standing up. But anyhow, 34 townhouses, that gave us a big break. We bought some more land in Newcastle, place near Toronto. I don't know how many houses we did, 300 houses or something. So we were getting rich now. And then he said, look, I have enough of houses. I want to go and do golf courses. So it was a passion. He said, I really want to build a golf course. And so he found some land in California of all places. So he went from Toronto to California. And somehow I said, no, I don't want to go to California. I'm going to go back to Ottawa. So I came back to Ottawa, bought a project of some 452 units with the money I made from Brampton, with Pramod Kumar, Newcastle and Brampton. He took his money, he went to California. I took my money, I came back to Ottawa. So there I was working for the government part-time, doing houses, doing rental part-time. I said, this is enough of the government. I quit the government at that time and started real estate in a bigger way. I built Gurdwara Sahib in Ottawa. I built Science Center in Ottawa. My wife belongs to Sikh religion. So I was ending up in Gurdwara, and my sister belonged to Science Center stuff, more Sai Baba stuff. So I built a Science Center. So I became popular in the community. So kept going on and kept building houses. And here I am. I'm still doing that. I'm 75 years old, as most of you guys are, and I'm still working.
So
I'm hoping
that's
someday
a
looking at
fabulous
that.
story, Anand. And for everybody's information, Anand has also been named as the 75 Indian jewels in Canada. He has also got Order of Ottawa. But the question which comes to my mind is that all these dollars which are flowing your way, what happened? How did you make them flow outwards towards community service?
Oh, I think it was kind of when you're in the business in any country, I guess. I felt that we East Indian are more busy at that time in building temples and gurdwaras and mandirs, and we are not contributing anything to the charity program. So I said, look, we got to do something. So I joined the board of Art Institute in Ottawa, and I said I must raise some funds for them and put the community name in focus. That we are not only takers, we are also givers, which we are. Indians are big givers, no question about that. So but our focus has been different. It's a change now. It was different at that time. Everybody was worried about mandir. Let's open a mandir. Let's open a gurdwara. So I said, no, let's continue doing what you're doing, but let's do something for the community. So there I was. I started some schemes of donating the state or donating your insurance or whatever you have, so that doesn't cost money today. So that way I was able to raise $11 million or something like that from the Art Institute. That passion continued. I do a charity event every year, getting 600 big VIPs from Ottawa, and at least we contribute 100,000 per year to some kind of a charity.
That,
And then basically,
that is such a wonderful story, and it is amazing to see, Dinesh, kind of, I can just imagine being at the frontier of, war zones and kind of building infrastructures over there. And here you are building houses and golf courses and all that kind of stuff. What fabulous. But also, what impresses me is the sense of values in terms of give back to the community. See, these are the values which we all cherish, which is what we have been born with in terms, not born exactly born with, but all of us have come from very humble backgrounds. But this is what
Right.
our formative years have taught us. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is lots more to hear from Anand, and we'll pick him up.
Pradeep, 1 second.
Yes.
Anand Agarwal also got certificate from the Governor General of Canada in the 2014 IIT Alumni Canada Conference as a Distinguished Alumnus Award.
Oh yes, yes, I know that.
Thank you for
I
reminding
know
me.
that. And I love the way Vijay is equating the Distinguished Alumni Award with the 75 crown jewels of India. So I love your enthusiasm, Vijay. But
Thank you.
yes, absolutely delighted, and we will get you along in our discussions later down, and involve you more and more in GCC. Let me go across to the next gentleman, and from uh, Ottawa, I will go across to Connecticut in USA. And leaving aside the Cargills
Okay.
and the dollars, Canadian dollars, I will now go across to Om Sharma. And
Yeah,
actually, when first of all, when I saw the name Om Sharma, I actually started, went to my mandir and started doing my prayers and all that. I said, maybe this is some religious leader. We've got good spiritual leaders in UK also. Before I found out that this man has been, possibly involved in the design of aviation engines and possibly most of the engines in the world. So, Om or Mo, whatever you say, please give a big round of applause to Om.
हूँ वैसे अभी ठीक है
Can I ask everybody to be on mute, please, except for the speaker? Yes, Om,
Yeah.
over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Pradeep. And again, good day to everybody, morning, evening, afternoon, and things like that. And actually, it's a pleasure to participate in the sessions which you are organizing. And good Sikand has done a good job, trying to get people from our batch, speaking with you guys. Again, I mean, we came to IIT. I'll kind of give you a little bit of an introduction. Coming into the IIT was an experience too. I mean, I come from Punjab, Haryana, and we used to sit on the carpet or patlo mein khane wale aadmi the. Came to IIT, all of a sudden, crockery and knife and fork and things like that. It was kind of a first shock of my life was really transitioning from home to IIT. And all of a sudden, the lifestyle changed. I mean, you had to call people sir, and all these British guys didn't understand, most of them for a while. So it was like a kind of a shock from going from school or from home to IIT. In IIT, we got the freedom. So a lot of us were not really as good in kind of a organizing their own thoughts and studying themselves. They were tutored in schools. And I was one of those people. So I kind of drifted in IIT and worked as much as I had to just to pass. Didn't really work that hard. And two of my contributions in IIT Delhi was somebody talked about the Sharma Dhaba. I started that. Actually, the guy used to sell chaat. So I told him, why don't you make us tea and parathas?
Yeah.
So that's how all of the things started. It wasn't, I mean, I didn't know him, it wasn't Sharma is okay, but so that's how it started. Or it was maybe, I think 65, probably 64 or 65. And, he made good. In IIT, again, I think the only two classes I remember, one is two projects I remember. We did a colloquium on artificial weather modification. There, I studied a lot, tried to figure out what causes rains and what happens in this one. And I'll come back to that in the latter part. And the other thing I did was we built a wind tunnel. where you could test airfoils, get experimental data. I think in applied mechanics, that wind tunnel is still there, even after almost 50 plus years. So people are still doing experiments in that wind tunnel. I graduated. After I graduated, I didn't really get any admission to any foreign universities. My grades were not that good. All these people, all of the colleagues which you're talking now, they kind of came abroad quickly. So I really ended up working at IIT for about 6 to 8 months as a technical assistant in the gas turbine lab or internal combustion engine lab downstairs in the mechanical engineering department. And then I joined MTech. I did my MTech, and in MTech, I built a radial turbine. That also very noisy radial turbine. So 1970, I completed my MTech and decided to go to England because job situation was still not that great in India. Went to England and joined Birmingham University to do PhD. I did PhD in centrifugal compressors, again. After my PhD, I worked there for a couple of years. And then I looked for a job with the engine manufacturing companies, Rolls-Royce, General Electric, and Pratt & Whitney. And Pratt & Whitney, they just kind of floored me. They hired me at that time. And Pratt & Whitney at that time, most of the flights, you guys come, 747, 777s, 727, 737, all these engines have been, kind of Pratt & Whitney were designing those engines. When I came in, when I joined in 1977, we were having, the company was having some issues in some development programs. And I was kind of fortunate to figure it out, what needs to be done to improve the designs of the engines. And then I kind of got, it's like you get intoxicated into solving problems. So I would say from 1977 to 1998, I worked on all the engines that Pratt & Whitney developed. And those engines were bent in 757, 777, 747s, and F-19. This is like a Joint Strike Fighter, and F-22. And my biggest contribution, I would say, was really kind of reducing the design cycle by eliminating experimentations through modeling. So this CFD, computational fluid dynamics, I would say I may have introduced into the design process in the engines. And overall, fuel consumption in gas turbine engines has reduced a lot, from 70s to now. I've made contributions in all rotating machinery, and it's kind of recognized by the industry as well as by the company. So 1998, I was asked to set up a modeling analysis simulation center at the headquarters, at the research lab, United Technologies Research Center. So I started that work and kind of worked on a couple of projects. One of them was I was asked to help design the sailboat for the America's Cup 2000. So we worked on that, again, in implementing modeling, whatever we had learned type of the thing. How do you model it as opposed to build it, test it, and kind of build it again? And the other was Otis elevator. We replaced the rope and pulley in the elevators with a belt and sheave, eliminating the machine room at the top floor and really improving the performance. 2001, 2000, I came back to Pratt & Whitney and worked on the development of some other engine programs. And so I've been kind of seduced by engines, just like reducing losses, improving the performance. And in the process, I've taught University of Connecticut. I've guided research programs at Stanford University and MIT. And, kind of a number of people who worked with me are in very strong positions in the Department of Defense and other areas. I'm kind of more like an idea man, probably. I don't implement as well as I kind of think of a path. So I've been fortunate that I got really good people working with me. And incidentally, when I joined Pratt & Whitney, somebody asked me, where did you graduate from? And I said, IIT Delhi. He says, never heard about it. I was not happy with this response. I said, one day you'll stand up and salute me for that. After 21 years, that guy came to my office and saluted me. He says, do you remember? I said, I remember. I mean, that was really rude. I shouldn't have done that to an HR person when you're being interviewed, but I wasn't happy, So IIT gave us kind of a confidence in yourself that you're okay. And the other thing is kind of a question, think about problems, think about kind of fundamentals, and that you'll figure it out. And most of the problems that are there, they're easy to solve because a lot of people have worked on them. So you know what doesn't work. And other thing which I found was biggest problem is really assumptions. People execute things right. It's just kind of they assume wrong things. And that's why you cannot solve the problems. I retired in June this year. And one of the things, what would you do after you retire? I'm kind of looking at climate because that artificial weather modification project I did in third year, kind of what needs to be done to kind of predict the weather and climate better. So I'm looking at that. It will take a while. I don't know whether I'll succeed or not, but at least I'll learn about it. I have been very fortunate because all the people I worked with have supported me. My friends, here, Anand and Rishi Dev and, and Aram and Bhatia. Everybody has been very supportive. In college, people were very supportive. And now also we started the Zoom meetings about 2 years ago, in response to the COVID going on. So we have a kind of good group of people working together.
This is a fabulous story. And for everybody's knowledge, and everybody knows that what a complicated piece of engineering is an aircraft. We all know the Max story and how it impacted the industry and the company. So hats off to you for some incredible work that you've done. And also, it is so nice to see that you've been continuing your journey up to now. And there's one more person I seem to recall in Canada called Agyapal. He also
APS Obra.
Yes, he also has done a lot of work in engines and all that. I vaguely seem to remember that.
Yeah.
So it will be lovely to get you and Agyapal in a session, as I would love to get Anant along with another of our alumni who was also awarded the highest honor in Canada, from the Canadian Space Agency. So we look forward to much more interesting stories and getting you more involved. And from Connecticut, and please give a round of applause to
Just for a minute. Just for a minute.
Yeah.
OP failed to mention that he got the Best Alumni Award in IIT Delhi in mid-90s.
Oh,
OP
wow.
Sharma.
Wow.
Oh, Rishi Dev, thanks a lot. I was fortunate. I was really worried, that they want to bring me back to take my degree away. But they gave me a distinguished alumni award.
So good. Please give a round of applause to Om also known by his avatar called Mo, as you would see on the Zoom screen. Let's go from Connecticut over back to India, and let's present the next speaker, whom people call as Admiral Ravinder Bhatia, जिसको हम प्यार से रवि बुलाते हैं. So please give a round of applause to Admiral Ravinder Bhatia, or in this GCC forum as Ravi, as we move from war zones to dollar zones to engine zones and to now dockyard zones. Ravi has had an incredible career again, being involved in construction of some of the largest dockyards, being managing director of some of the big ones. But over to you, Ravi. Let's hear your story post IIT.
Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you so much. And my namaskar to all our colleagues, all our youngsters, all our, there may be some seniors also still attending this, I don't know. So pranam and namaskar to everyone. I straight away come to the point. I have been given about 15 minutes and I will try to cover up this long journey in very short time. As you all know, 67 batch is a batch of, we are all pre-partition born, pre-independence born, and joined our schools at the time when India was a poor country, very poor country. Education facilities were not there, and most of us, I think our first schooling started around 1950. And there were no schools, only municipal schools, government schools. Your fees used to be about 2 paisa those days. And as Om said, we used to sit on the tart. My first school, after I straight away jumped to my 4th grade when we came to Chandigarh from Shimla. And my first school was called Ambawala School because it was under the mango trees. And there was a wooden blackboard outside. There was a small room for the principal or the headmaster. And we used to sit out and study there and live. And that is when we had moved to Chandigarh, because Chandigarh was coming up. It was yet to come up. It was a new city. But I think that was the biggest thing, best thing which happened to me and most of us who came after partition from Pakistan. So my journey starts there. Chandigarh was a place for very good education system, which was coming up. It was very cheap. There was no difference between, senior IAS officer or a governor or a peon's child. Everyone went to the same schools, and there was no inferiority complex or superiority complex. But because those days there were no scooters, there were no mobiles, there was nothing to show. Everyone had a bicycle, and that was it all. You had no other position. So, and everyone was struggling after having come from Pakistan after the partition. So I did my schooling from Chandigarh, and then, of course, the IIT Delhi. Now, landed up in 1962 at Delhi from Chandigarh, along with Ashwini Dhalwala, who is also in Bay Area, and a couple of others. There were big groups were there from Jaipur, from Chandigarh, from Jalandhar, from Amritsar, from Ludhiana. That was one group. And second group was Delhi. And third was a group of students who had come from various, high-end schools and hostels of different kinds, and also from around the country. So it was a sudden coming out of a small town, which was coming up down Chandigarh, and coming to this IIT, where suddenly every jargon started changing, and we're finding a little out of place, and especially with the British professors and all, very difficult to understand what they're saying. But slowly, it took about 6 to 8 months to adapt, and then we were well in it and doing well, reasonably well in the class. Did mechanical engineering, heat power under YC Sood, sir. Our head of the department was Professor N.W. Moore from Imperial College London. Maths was Richard K. Guy. Workshop was Russell. Humanities was one guy called Gomes. He was a youngster. And our one English class used to be taken by Mrs. Laj Yunus, the wife of Mr. Muhammad Yunus, who was a very key man in Indian politics as well as in the international affairs. So it was that environment, and we learned a lot. And whole jargon changed during the IIT days when we were in Shivalik and Vindhyachal hostels. Other hostels were yet to come up. Kailash hostel had just started. If I remember correctly, there were 4 or 5 girls in the whole IIT. And but one-to-one interaction with our teachers, our lecturers, professors was very good. Everyone knew everyone, and we were pretty happy. We bonded very well in small groups. There was a table tennis table, there was a radio. TV had, I think, not yet come. And we grew up on log tables, graduated to slide rules, graduated to calculator was banned. The computers for calculations, for all these things, we had to go to USA Institute, the Agriculture Institute, and buy time on cards and go there with the Fortran language and do our projects which we're doing. When I was in the 4th year, that is the pre-final year, in 1966, a team came for placement, campus placement from the Navy. And just out of no idea what is Navy, what is it, I just landed up there listening to that lecture. They said anybody who wants to join can come for the interview. I went for the interview there only. And we were selected, few of us, and then we were called to Meerut for services selection board, fitness test, all kinds of things, group leadership test, that, psychological researching test, 4 or 5 days of, complete distinct to you. And then finally, out of them, from IIT Delhi, we were 3 selected. And then in my final year, Navy started paying me. I became acting sub-lieutenant, not in uniform. So that was it. And after that, what happened is that in July 67, after having passed out from the IIT, I landed up at Cochin Harbour Terminus. The first time getting out so much away from homeland, Chandigarh, or from IIT Delhi, and landing up at Cochin after I think those days, 3.5 days journey. And I lost all my baggage on the way. In the train, somebody took it away, and landed up at Cochin with practically nothing. But anyway, after that, we were given a basic and divisional training, which is basic, your parade, your culture, your Navy culture, your eating etiquettes, your dressing etiquettes, your uniforms, your, the jargon, everything. And then you start going to sea. My first ship was the first aircraft carrier of India, INS Vikrant. I boarded that. In fact, I still remember Indira Gandhi, that time Prime Minister. She came on board. She sailed with us, and we received our first submarine which came to India, INS Kalvari, off the Arabian Sea, and then brought us back to Cochin. So then after that, you again have to go to Lonavala, which is INS Shivaji, to do your, they sort of convert you to a marine engineer. So it was very easy because we were from, our theory and all was very good. It was not very difficult to understand anything. And Then we landed up on board ships. Now that is where the challenge came. To do your watchkeeping, that means you can take independent charge of an engine room or service room, and ship is a floating city, floating fighting city, which fends for itself. It has to float, it has to move, it has to fight, it has have to have an ability to be hit and still keep fighting after repairing yourself. With fire on board, with missiles firing on you, you should be able to, which is the fourth angle of the whole ship. That is called the NBCT, nuclear, biological, chemical warfare. That means you have to be insulated to that, and firefighting and damage control. That means you got a hole, you should be able to repair it and still move on and keep fighting. So this is the story of getting into after you get your watchkeeping ticket. And then I landed up in Visakhapatnam. There were only 5 officers. It was a small, sleepy town, and it was only 2-3 major companies were there that time. One was Hindustan Shipyard. Visakhapatnam steel plant was yet to come up. Zinc smelter plant was coming up, and Coromandel fertilizers had already come up, and so that is it. And the Navy had just started, as I said. Dockyard had only, it was called a base repair organization, and there was hardly any ships there, and there were only small 5 hutments in which the workshops were there. From this 5 today, that dockyard has more than 4,000 workers, and in fact, dockyard has 15,000 workers. I'm sorry, and it has become a huge dockyard. In fact, you can say the best of Southeast Asia and east of Europe. It is one of the largest repair facilities available for the warships, and anything to do with the right from nuclear submarines to destroyers, frigates, etc., etc. Now I'll straight away jump to 71 war. Now what happened is that 71 war, when it was declared, the siren was there was a, this is the naval way of doing it, or in the services all around, that there's a siren around the city, that wherever you are, come down, whatever you're doing. So we all landed up at the parade ground. Admiral Krishnan, who was the commander-in-chief, stood there. He said, gentlemen, only it was a half a minute speech. He said, gentlemen, we are at war. We shall fight, fight, fight. We shall attack, attack, attack. And you all get on with your job. That was it. This was announced. This was on 3rd of December, 1971.
Just one second. Somnath, can you mute yourself? Yes, back to you. Somnath Mitra, can you mute yourself?
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Back to you.
May I? Yeah. Okay. So that was it. So the war has started. This was on 3rd. Submarine, Pakistan submarine Ghazi was hanging around at the mouth of the entrance to the Visakhapatnam harbor. We had sent out all our ships out of the harbor because Pakistan Navy, our intelligence reports had said, is going to sink one bulk carrier at the entrance, and then no ship can come out of that channel. That was their plan. Their target was INS Vikrant, the aircraft carrier. We had sent the aircraft carrier to north of Andaman. They didn't know about it. And they were chasing her in this area. And then suddenly news came that one of our ships, Rajput, old INS Rajput, had gone, attacked. They had detected a submarine just off the Visakhapatnam port, and they had sent some depth charges, and finally that submarine sank. Later on, the divers went, it was deep down there, but their effects were taken out, some dead bodies were taken out, their personal diaries, whether they were Pakistanis or what. Fact is that our heart and soul did go to them, because you put yourself also in that condition. Somebody is written to his sister, somebody is written to his mother, somebody's sister has sent in a Rakhi, that kind of letters coming out. It was right. That is the problem with the war. Anyway, so now we move further. In the meantime, some Egyptian submarines landed up after their conflict with the Israelis. They landed up in India unannounced, and it created a big issue. And Bombay dockyard had never handled a submarine, so they were sent to Visakhapatnam. Our officer in charge was one Commander Mukundam, late Commander Mukundam, Commodore Mukundam. He is, God bless his soul, no more. He took the challenge, and as luck would have it, as a Lieutenant Bhatia, I was given the charge of looking after those submarines the moment they came, because I was junior most, and the 4 officers senior to me were busy with other ships, plus no one wanted to take that risk. That is the truth. And the chief engineer of the submarine, when he came and told my officer in charge, so who's this youngster, how he will come on board, why are you sending him? So my officer in charge told me, son, are you afraid? I said, frankly, I didn't know that chap is the chief engineer of the submarine. He was in that overalls, and very dirty overalls. I said, if this chap can go, I can also go. So I was sent in there, and I had my first taste of a dive in a submarine. We did 4 days of sea trials, and during that dive, my knowledge was very sort of scant, but I actually first brushed with the submarine. And just a quick one, if you give me some time, Pradeep, I'll take maybe another 5-10 minutes. I want to explain this. It's very interesting. You know what happened? I was here in the navigating room of the submarine. Submarine is very small. It's a pressure vessel. It's like we being in a gas cylinder, and it's a pressure vessel, and you don't know where you are. You are actually inside under the sea. So we were at a depth of about, now there are basically 3-4 depths, important ones. One is the surface, when you're going at the surface of the sea. Second is about 9 meters down, which is the periscopic depth, where the periscope comes out and you can see out, and also it is a snorkel. You sort of breathe in and give out the air for the engines from there. This is the diesel engine. And we battery charging. So after that, you go down to 30 meters, and then to 100 meters, and then the test depths of, let's say, those kind of submarine, Russian submarines, of about 240 meters to test depth up to about, let's say, those days. Nowadays, it's much higher. It used to be about 38 kilograms per centimeter square, which is a very high pressure. And suddenly, I could see some commotion in the submarine. The submarine had started losing depth, and it started going down and down, and it takes off, it sort of dives or surfaces like the aircraft. Aircraft also lands sort of at certain angle, attack angle. Similarly, submarine also dives at that angle, goes down like this. Now, what had happened is more it lost its trim from the front, from the forward, more pressure came on its hull, and more it started losing, and it was becoming more and more inclined to the bottom and diving faster. The gluvinometer, which is the one which sees your depth going, you're going down and down and down and down. And then there was a commotion. I thought it was something very normal. And then I saw the commanding officer coming out of his cabin in the control room, giving an order. 3 astern, that means all 3 motors, that time you're on motors, to be pulled back. And they were worried because the batteries were already losing their strength and could trip anytime. But luckily, plus he gave one order, which is the emergency order called Q. You come up like a cork. And we came up, God's grace, we were saved. And so that is a very, very interesting story. Now, why I'm linking, because of that, then I was picked up and sent to Russia in Siberia for, I did 2.5 years there, being trained on major refits of submarines of Russian origin. So 3 years, basically roughly 3 years in Siberia, in Vladivostok, then also in between for short courses in, from there only, my headquarters was with family, average temperatures -26, like that. And it was all, different. They had never seen Indians. For them, our ladies were gypsies because they used to put on a bindi and they would take away their children if they saw our ladies. So it was, but later on, we became part of the city. From there, then I went to Kronstadt, where Hitler came up to the Lomonosov station near St. Petersburg, Leningrad. I did a course there on submarines again, on their various systems, high pressure air systems, hydraulic systems, etc., etc. Then came back to India and set up facilities for the Indian Navy submarines in the dockyard. And from there on, then I was posted to sea. I took on a Russian origin frigate as the chief engineer. That was a long story again. That ship finally went to Karachi during the 71 war. I was not on board. I had just moved to the headquarters, but this ship finally became a Mahavir Chakra ship because they entered Karachi harbor and fired from Kiltan. Captain Gopal Das Gopal Rao was the CEO, and they fired. They went in. They fired. Karachi was ablaze. All their fuel dumps were completely ablaze, and then they ran back. So these are long stories. I'm just jumping steps, and from there, then I did my sea time. Came back again to the dockyard. Then I was selected to take over training commander of Indian Navy's largest establishment of training all engineers, including electrical engineers, nuclear, biological, chemical, damage control, defense, shipwrights, you name it, and it's there. It's like your equivalent establishments in UK, Russia, Australia, etc. We train their officers from all these countries, including Africa, Bangladesh. In fact, at one time I had trainees from Iran and Iraq also there. Then after that, I was again appointed chief engineer of country's biggest destroyer. That is new INS Rajput. It was a gas turbine ship, gas turbine propulsion. This one, what do you call, 4 gas turbines, 2 engine rooms, gas turbine generation, and all other with missiles, surface to surface missiles, surface to air missiles, torpedoes, guns, depth charges, and you name it. It's one of the latest state-of-the-art ships. And I was there on board for 3 years. And from there, then again after Rajput, I was made the head of the Indian Navy's gas turbine establishment, which looked after all gas turbines because ships had jumped from, when we started, ships used to be up and down steam engines. From there we came to diesel engines, then we came to these gas turbines. And so ships were all becoming gas turbine based ships. So I was heading that, moving from this side to, and it's all maintenance and health monitoring job. So it was a very challenging job. I was like a doctor. I would get a call, problem in ship in Gujarat somewhere, just pick up a bag and take a flight and move there. But Navy will send an aircraft, you move there. There is some problem somewhere, you just move there and give them some extension of life or whatever. So that was that. After that, Rajput, so then I got promoted and I took over as general manager of Bombay Dockyard. This was a big challenge, 15,000 workers and all kinds of Western origin ships and submarines, German submarines, French was just coming up, Russian submarines, and all destroyers, frigates, and normal offshore patrol vessels. So quickly, I'll again jump from here. This was a big challenge because there were about, I think, 11 unions to handle. But very challenging, very interesting. From there, suddenly one day I got a call that you moved to Korea. So I had, my son was in the 8th grade, very less time. I said, how I can move? They said, no, you have to go, there's a requirement. I thought it's a short visit. It was for 3 years to do some special projects on offshore patrol vessels. 7 vessels were to be built, 3 in Korea and 4 in India. So I landed up there. So with family. I never told my wife that there's no English medium school there. But luckily there was an American school for Department of Defense school. And my son could study there. And that was it. Anyway, then again I jump. I spent 3 years there. And my biggest achievement there, in addition to delivering the ships ahead of time, was that I made very close contacts with Hyundai, Samsung, Daewoo, all professionally, as well as otherwise. And as a tribute to the Indian contingent, which I was heading, I was given the honorary citizenship of that city of Masan by the mayor of Masan city.
Wow.
And it was a headline news. And in lighter vein, they landed up TV crews, this, that. My wife was at home and she called up. She said, I don't know what has happened. She thought, God knows what happened. I straight away told my interpreter and my, secretary. I said, just call up home. Check what's going on. Speak there. She said, no, they have come. This is, you are being honored. So, cutting it short, this TV crew asked my wife. He says, what is your relation between you and your husband? Now, she used to talk to the neighbor. They used to sit down with a dictionary and, keep sharing their normal ladies' gossip. And there's a Korean sort of a jargon. It's called Inko Bubu. They are the lovebirds. So she said, we are Inko Bubu couple. She just said. Next day headline in the local paper, the Inko Bubu couple. And now they asked me, how do you like Korea? Would you like to come? That time I was about to finish my tenure. It was about 4 months more. So I said, I will, anytime I would like to come back. It's a beautiful country and great country. And that's the time we had the Olympics also. So in that headline only, they said, I will come back, says Captain. So it was very interesting. Came back, then I took over INS Shivaji Lonavala again as the commanding officer. I'll take 5 minutes more. Commanding officer of INS Shivaji. And that, of course, I did 3 years there. And then I got promoted to Admiral. I became Director General of Naval Projects in Visakhapatnam, setting up facilities for nuclear submarines. I had, in fact, MES staff, very major staff of ours was MES, actually, from the engineers corps of the Army and military engineering service. In fact, my chief engineer, they were all from MES. And then from there, as the Director General of Naval Projects, Hindustan Shipyard fell vacant as the chairman's job. So I applied, I was selected. So I moved over from Navy, that is in 97. I took a lateral movement to the public sector shipyard. And there I did 6 years as chairman. Then I was promoted as chairman of Mazagon Docks in Bombay, which is the Schedule A company like ONGC, etc. and I did 3 years there. And there we got the submarine project with the French, plus we were doing the Germans, plus we were doing the Russians. So it was a great experience. And when I retired from government service in 2005, I was asked by one of the investors to set up a new shipyard of international standards. They had chosen a site in Gujarat in a place called Pipavav near Rajula, near Diu, if you all know. So I took that challenge. I worked there 11 years, set up that shipyard, got the Navy's orders. In fact, I signed a MOU with the American Navy. And so that is my story.
That is
So I think
such a fabulous story, and what a fabulous journey. And we have to remember that the batch of 67 has been around and they've seen a generational change. From the time we were just emerging from independence to right up to the time in 1990 when we had just 6 weeks of foreign exchange left in the country. And remember that not all of the batch of 1967 went to defense or overseas. So first of all, let us give a very big round of applause to our dear Ravi. Now, all I would say is, in the interest of time, we have one more speaker today, which is Rishi Madan, and that is again a very fabulous story in the private sector, starting with a sleepy town in India. With Rishi's permission, Rishi, if you are okay, we will take it up next time, simply because we need time to hear your story. And I've got another call starting in exactly 8 minutes, and people will be starting to come into Zoom because it is the same Zoom channel. So if you are okay, Rishi, where are you?
It's okay with me. It's okay with me.
Because we need time to hear about your story, how you built ISJEC, or how you saw the development of ISJEC from. Because I remember, as I mentioned to you, that I used to go to Yamuna Nagar with, ISJEC used to buy a lot of motors from Crompton Greaves when I used to work with Crompton Greaves. And my perception of ISJEC, and for everybody's attention, our dear friend Rishi Madan has worked with only one company all through his career, and that company was ISJEC. So, but that's a very interesting story of how the evolution of the company in the private sector, from a sleepy old town to Yamunanagar, now to a $1 billion business and spread over different locations in the country, into engineering based story. So let's have him at another time. And with this, I will, and just before I hand it over to Dinesh to sum it up, to just remind everybody that the next session, GCC session, which is on 25th September, we will be presenting Kailash, the girl power of IIT Delhi. But before we come on to that, let's give it to Dinesh to sum up today's session. So over to you, Dinesh.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the patient hearing. And well, this was just a glimpse, I will say, of 1967 batch. We have still greater people around in that huge batch, actually. And in the end, for today, I think you just remember that Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara. So you must enjoy the moment, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dinesh. And it was absolutely lovely to hear Anand, Om, Ravi, and we look forward to listening to the journey of Rishi and a couple of other people in one of the future sessions. Take care, have a lovely morning, evening, afternoon, night, and once again a big salute to the 1967 batch. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Pradeep.